When Emma Blake set out for a solo hike through Coldwater Pass, she wasn't just chasing adventure. She was chasing ghosts, the stories that locals whispered about, the shadows that the rangers refused to talk about. She thought she was prepared. But when she vanished, she left behind something far more chilling than just an empty trail, a final message that no one can explain. Emma Blake was 27 years old when she disappeared. She wasn't a reckless thrill seeker. She had spent years hiking some of the toughest trails across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. She kept a meticulous trail diary, left trip plans with friends, and always carried a GPS locator. To anyone who knew her, Emma was smart, cautious, and prepared. That's why what happened on May 14, 2019 at Coldwater Pass didn't make sense. Coldwater Pass was a jagged scar winding through the mountains northwest of Mount St. Helens. After the 1980 eruption, the landscape around it had changed, forests stripped away, the ground unsettled. In the decades that followed, hikers started telling stories about the area, about missing time, about strange lights on the ridges, about hearing voices calling from the trees. Emma had read those stories. That's exactly why she went. Her sister, Jessica Blake, later said, Emma loved the weird stuff. She read Missing 411. She loved ghost stories, conspiracy theories. She thought Coldwater was just a bunch of creepy campfire tales. She wanted to prove it was all fake. Emma arrived at the trailhead at 6:48 a.m. She texted Jessica a selfie bundled up in a green jacket, a bright red backpack over her shoulders, Coldwater Ridge looming in the background. She looked excited, confident. That would be the last clear photo of her alive. At 2:13 p.m., Emma texted Jessica again. It wasn't like her usual upbeat messages. It simply said, "Feels like I'm being watched. Maybe a cougar? Something's not right. Gonna head back early." Jessica texted back immediately. "Get to the car and call me." No reply. At 2:31 p.m., Emma sent one final text, a single photo. The image showed a cluster of trees, gray, skeletal, stripped of bark, standing against a pale, misty sky. If you zoomed in, you could see something strange. Behind the trees, a figure stood. It wasn't clear. Blurry. Tall. Wrong. The figure had no distinguishable face, but the limbs looked too long. The posture, unnatural. At first, Jessica thought it was just motion blur, a trick of the mist. But later, experts examined the metadata. The photo was taken under stable conditions. No camera shake. No artifacting. Whatever it was standing there, watching Emma. By nightfall, Emma hadn't called. Jessica drove the 3 hours to Coldwater herself. By the time she arrived, it was pitch dark. The ranger station was closed. She spent the night in her car, calling Emma's phone over and over. It rang twice and then went dead. At dawn, the rangers launched a search party. Dogs picked up her scent quickly, leading into the woods, but after 2 miles, the trail just ended. No signs of struggle. No dropped gear. No blood. Her GPS beacon never sent a distress signal. Her emergency radio was found lying neatly on a rock, undamaged, as if someone had placed it there intentionally. The searchers fanned out across the ridges, through the trees, down into the canyons. They found odd things. A pair of her hiking boots, placed side by side, perfectly aligned, as if she had taken them off and walked barefoot into the forest. A small pile of river stones stacked into a pyramid in the middle of the trail. Emma's necklace, a simple silver pendant, hung from the top rock. And most disturbing of all, a single Polaroid photo stuck under a tree branch. It was a blurry image of Emma's face. Mouth open, eyes wide, fear frozen forever in black and white. But Emma didn't bring a Polaroid camera. No one could explain it. By day 6, the search was called off. The rangers announced Emma had likely gotten lost, suffered a fall, or been attacked by wildlife. Coldwater was rugged terrain after all. It wasn't unusual for bodies never to be recovered. Case closed. Jessica didn't believe it. She knew her sister. Emma wouldn't just wander off the trail. She wouldn't leave her gear behind. She wouldn't walk barefoot through an active cougar territory. And she definitely wouldn't have left a cryptic photo behind. 2 weeks after the search was called off, Jessica returned to Coldwater alone. She retraced Emma's planned route, photographing everything, marking strange landmarks. On the second day, deep in the woods, her phone glitched out, battery full, yet it powered off. When she turned it back on, her clock was wrong. It said 3:13 p.m. But it was still morning. Then she heard it. Someone calling her name. Jess. It was Emma's voice. Faint, echoing between the trees. Jessica ran toward the sound. Branches whipped at her face. The ground seemed to shift under her feet. The trees grew closer together, choking off the light. She stumbled into a clearing. There, lying neatly in the center, was Emma's missing backpack. It was zipped up, untouched, and inside, tucked between the pages of Emma's trail diary, was something Jessica would never forget. A small digital recorder. Still running. Still recording. The display blinked. Time elapsed, 38 hours, 12 minutes. A backpack untouched for weeks. A recorder that somehow never ran out of power. Jessica Blake knew she had found a piece of her sister's last moments. But she wasn't ready for what was on that tape. No one was. The recorder was an old Olympus model, the kind journalists used before smartphones took over. Scratched, battered, but still blinking steadily. Jessica sat in her car at the trailhead, her hands trembling as she pressed play. At first, there was only static. Hissing, popping. Then Emma's voice, sharp and clear. May 14th, 3:04 p.m. Coldwater Pass. I think I'm being followed. The sound of her boots crunching over gravel. Wind breathing through the trees. Every so often, Emma would mutter under her breath. Stay calm, stay calm. Minutes passed. The trail noises faded. Then, out of nowhere, a second voice emerged. Not Emma's. Low. Whispering. Unintelligible at first, just a garbled murmur, but rising, filling the recorder with a horrible, crawling sound like words spoken backward. Emma gasped. You could hear her footsteps speeding up, almost running now. Then she screamed. Not a full-throated scream, more like a sudden, choked cry. The sound of her falling. Gravel skidding. She was sobbing, begging. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. The whispering grew louder. Now it wasn't one voice. It was many. Layered, overlapping, chanting something just beyond understanding. Jessica's stomach turned. The voices felt wrong, like they didn't belong in the world. At the 28-minute mark, the audio changed. There was a dragging sound. Something heavy moving across dirt and stone. Emma's breathing fast, shallow, terrified. And then, a single clear phrase spoken in a flat, mechanical voice, Emma's own voice, but twisted, broken. You can't leave once you're seen. The tape ended with a long, high-pitched ringing. No final scream. No struggle. Just that endless, deafening sound. Jessica drove straight to Portland the next day. She contacted a forensic audio analyst, a man named Dr. Lowell Simmons, who worked with missing persons units. When she handed over the recorder, Simmons raised an eyebrow. Running after 2 weeks? No way. These old models have about 40 hours of battery. Max. Jessica insisted. She showed him where she found it. He agreed to analyze the recording. 2 days later, he called her in. Inside his lab, the audio played again, this time filtered, cleaned up, enhanced. He pointed at the screen where the sound waves rippled across. See this? This is human speech. He moved to another section. And this is something else. Look at the frequency range. The screen showed massive distortions, spikes at ranges outside human hearing, both too low and too high. If I didn't know better, I'd say this was an interference pattern. But with what, I have no idea. It's like two signals bleeding into each other. He paused. There's one more thing. He zoomed into a 5-second clip from the 37-minute mark, right before the tape ended. Hidden under the static was a second recording. Emma's voice again, but this time it was whispering something. Help me. Under the stones. Find me. Jessica's blood ran cold. Under the stones? What stones? Jessica knew she had no choice. She had to go back to Coldwater Pass. She prepared differently this time, hired 2 experienced trackers from Spokane, both ex-military. She showed them the last GPS coordinates Emma's phone had sent and the hint from the recording. They headed out at dawn. The woods seemed different now. Darker. Wrong. At one point, one of the trackers, Nate, pointed out something strange. Every tree within a quarter-mile radius had a series of deep gashes, like claw marks, but too high, almost 12 feet off the ground. No animal around here could do that. Jessica didn't care. She pressed on. Midway through the second day, they found it. A clearing deep in the woods. And in the middle, a perfect circle of stones. Dozens of them, arranged with eerie precision, stacked into pyramids, spirals, and runic shapes that no one recognized. The earth inside the circle looked different, darker, as if scorched. The air smelled wrong, too. Sweet, almost rotten. Jessica approached the largest stone pile, heart hammering in her chest. She remembered the words. Under the stones. With trembling hands, she began pulling rocks away. One by one. The trackers watched, uneasy, hands resting on their holstered guns. Finally, beneath the last layer, she found it. A small bundle wrapped in cloth. Carefully, she unwrapped it. Inside was a scrap of fabric, part of Emma's jacket, and a lock of her hair, and a Polaroid, another one. This time, the photo showed a night scene. The same clearing under the stars with a dark figure standing in the center, staring straight at the camera. No face, no features, just a towering shadow. But this time, scrawled in shaky handwriting across the bottom of the photo, were 3 words: "She's not gone." Emma's last message hinted she wasn't gone. The photo found under the stones confirmed it. But as Jessica dug deeper into Coldwater's secrets, she realized too late, something else had found her first. The trackers, Nate and Colin, wanted to leave. They argued in hushed voices while Jessica stared at the photo, her hands shaking. "This is wrong, Jess," Nate said. "This place, it's not natural." Jessica ignored him. She had to know. She had to find Emma. As night fell, they made camp just outside the stone circle, none of them willing to sleep near it. The fire crackled weakly. An unnatural stillness pressed down around them. No insects, no wind. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The first night, around 2:14 a.m., Jessica woke to a faint noise. At first, she thought it was just the fire popping. But then she heard it again. A whisper, soft, weaving through the trees like mist. "Jessica!" She sat up, heart pounding. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Help me!" It was Emma's voice. Jessica grabbed a flashlight and stumbled from the tent. The trackers stirred, muttering, but she barely noticed. The voice was leading her. She followed the sound into the woods, the trees crowding closer, the darkness growing thicker. Her flashlight flickered, dimming with every step. And then she saw it. Emma, standing just beyond the tree line, wearing the same green jacket, same red backpack, but her face was wrong. Pale, blank, eyes black as holes. Jessica stumbled back, gasping. The thing that looked like Emma tilted its head slowly, unnaturally far to the side, like an owl. Then it smiled. Not a human smile, a wide, gaping grin that split its face in two. Jessica ran. Branches tore at her clothes and skin. She tripped, fell, scrambled to her feet. When she burst back into camp, the fire had been extinguished. The tents were slashed open. The trackers were gone. Jessica screamed their names, but the woods swallowed her voice. Something moved between the trees, too fast, too silent. Not human. She backed toward the dying embers of the fire, fumbling for a weapon, anything, and grabbed a burning stick. The moment she held it up, the thing in the woods stopped moving. It was afraid of the fire, at least for now. Jessica kept the torch lit, heart hammering, waiting for dawn. When the gray light of morning finally came, Jessica ventured cautiously into the trees. No sign of Nate or Colin. No blood, no tracks, as if they had never been there. The only thing she found was a single footprint, large, elongated, with toes longer than a human's, pressed deep into the mud. It led away from the campsite, toward the northern ridge, toward the place locals called the Silent Grounds. Jessica stumbled back to Coldwater Station, exhausted and terrified. She found the only person willing to talk, an old forest guide named Marla Jennings. When Jessica told her about the stone circles, the whispers, the missing men, Marla's face drained of color. She sat Jessica down and said, "You need to listen to me. Those woods, they're not dead. They're alive, feeding. Every few years, someone goes missing. And every few years, someone else comes back. But changed." Jessica stared at her. Changed how? Marla looked away. Not right, not human anymore. She hesitated, then pulled out a faded newspaper clipping. 1983, 4 search and rescue volunteers vanish near Coldwater Ridge. Only one body ever found, identified as SAR leader David Wills. Autopsy revealed severe skeletal distortions and unexplained cellular mutations. Mutations. Jessica's mind raced. Could the forest change people? Could Emma still be alive somewhere, but different? Jessica had to know. Armed with Marla's old trail maps, she headed toward the Silent Grounds. a place so feared that even the most hardened hunters refused to go. The closer she got, the more the forest changed. The trees grew twisted, their trunks spiraling unnaturally. The air grew cold and thin. Time seemed to stretch and warp, minutes feeling like hours, hours like seconds. She reached the ridge by dusk. Before her lay a shallow valley, utterly silent. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Only a thick mist that clung to the earth like smoke. In the center of the valley stood an old structure, barely more than a ruin now, made of black stone, overgrown with vines and moss. It looked ancient, older than any human settlement. Jessica crossed the threshold, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Inside, strange symbols lined the walls, spirals, claw marks, distorted human figures. And on the far wall, written in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood, was a message. Do not answer the voices. Do not look into their faces. Do not stay after dark. Jessica's breath fogged in the frigid air. She turned and froze. At the edge of the mist, just outside the ruin, dozens of figures stood. Tall, thin, watching her, their faces hidden in the shadows. The sun was sinking fast. She had minutes, maybe less, to get out. Coldwater's secret wasn't just the disappearances. It wasn't just the whispers. Buried beneath the mist was something older and far more terrifying than Jessica Blake ever imagined. And now it had found her. Jessica stood frozen in the mouth of the ruin. The mist rolled thicker across the valley floor, creeping up her legs, numbing her skin. The figures watched, unmoving, silent. Her flashlight flickered again, the beam struggling against the heavy fog. She had to leave? Now. Jessica backed into the ruin, heart pounding, scanning for another way out. The main doorway was blocked, the figures filled the entrance like a dark tide. As she stumbled through the crumbling structure, her foot struck something. She looked down. A stone trapdoor, half buried under moss and debris. There was no time to hesitate. Jessica dropped to her knees, clawed the vines away, and pulled. The trapdoor groaned open, releasing a cold blast of air that smelled of wet earth and something older. Something dead. Without thinking, she slipped into the darkness below. The trapdoor slammed shut above her. The air underground was freezing. The walls were smooth stone, carved with more of the strange symbols. Jessica switched her flashlight to low beam, trying to preserve the battery. The tunnel sloped downward, twisting and turning, leading deeper into the earth. Her footsteps echoed weirdly, as if the space around her was shifting with every step. Sometimes she thought she heard voices behind her, soft, mocking laughter, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Finally, after what felt like an hour, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Jessica gasped. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone altar covered in fresh moss. Carved into its surface were rows of human faces, screaming, eyes wide in terror, forever trapped in stone. Around the edges of the room, shadowy doorways gaped like open mouths, leading into deeper darkness. Jessica took one cautious step forward, and then she heard it. A scraping sound. From one of the doorways. Jessica froze. The scraping came again, slow, deliberate, getting closer. She backed toward the altar, clutching her flashlight like a weapon. Something emerged from the dark. Not human. Not animal. Something wrong. It was tall, skeletal, wrapped in tattered cloth that dragged behind it like smoke. Its face was a shifting blur, sometimes a woman, sometimes a snarling beast, sometimes a blank, eyeless mask. It spoke without moving its mouth, a voice that echoed inside Jessica's head. You called us. You heard us. Now you must see. Jessica stumbled backward, but the stone altar flared to life. A flash of images exploded in her mind. Emma standing in the woods calling her name. A dark shape behind Emma, whispering into her ear. A hole impossibly deep carved into the earth, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something ancient and blind, waking beneath Coldwater. Jessica screamed. The vision stopped. When she opened her eyes, the figure was gone. But on the altar now lay something new. Emma's GPS beacon. Still blinking. Still sending a signal. Coordinates. Leading deeper into the ruin. Jessica faced a choice. She could turn back. Find a way out. Save herself. Or she could follow the beacon. Follow it into the depths where even light seemed afraid to go. She gripped the GPS and forced her shaking legs to move. Downward. Deeper. Each step felt heavier, the air thicker. The walls pressed closer. The whispering voices returned, but now they didn't call Jessica's name. They called Emma's. Over and over. At the end of the lowest tunnel, Jessica found it. A massive stone well carved straight into the earth, descending into blackness. The beacon's signal pointed straight down. Hesitating only for a moment, Jessica peered over the edge. Far below, something moved. Not Emma. Something wearing her face. It looked up. It saw Jessica, and it smiled that impossible, gaping smile. Suddenly, cold hands grabbed Jessica's shoulders from behind. She screamed, twisting away, but no one was there. The whispering voices rose to a shriek, deafening, tearing through her mind. She stumbled back from the well just as a long, pale hand reached up from the darkness, grasping at the edge. She turned and ran. Jessica sprinted blindly through the tunnels, the walls blurring around her. Every step, something clawed at her, unseen fingers raking her skin. Somehow, she found the way back to the trapdoor. It was still shut, still sealed. Jessica rammed it with her shoulder. It didn't budge. Behind her, footsteps scraped closer. She grabbed the stone's edges, pushed, heaved with every ounce of strength. The trapdoor creaked open an inch. Enough. She wriggled through, gasping into the cold night air. The mist had thickened almost solid now. The figures still waited outside the ruin. But they didn't follow. They just stood, watching as Jessica fled into the trees. Hours later, Jessica stumbled into an old ranger station abandoned for years. There, using the last battery on her phone, she tried to send her location to anyone who might be listening. As she tapped the screen, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Unknown number. No sender. Just 2 words. Not alone. Jessica Blake escaped the ruin, but not alone. Now, hunted by something she can't see and haunted by messages she can't explain. Jessica will discover that Emma's disappearance was only one chapter in Coldwater's dark history. Jessica huddled in the abandoned ranger station, blood dried on her hands and face, staring at the message on her phone. Not alone. She tried calling out, dialing 911 emergency services, but every call failed before it even rang. The phone screen flickered. Another message appeared. No number. No sender. Just coordinates. A place in the forest miles north of Coldwater Pass. The Silent Grounds. The same area where search parties had vanished decades earlier. Jessica didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed to run the other way. But the GPS beacon from Emma's pack still pulsed steadily, leading her in the same direction. She had no choice. At dawn, Jessica forced herself back into the mist-shrouded forest. Each step toward the coordinates felt heavier, harder, as if the air itself tried to push her back. Around her, trees loomed like skeletal sentinels. Sometimes she caught flashes of movement between the trunks, pale limbs, black eyes, twisted faces. But when she looked straight at them, they were gone. Hours passed. The woods grew stranger. The ground was littered with old, rusted gear, broken radios, torn boots, shredded jackets, all belonging to the missing search parties from years ago. Jessica's flashlight caught something half-buried under a pile of leaves. A ranger's badge. David Wills, SAR Commander, 1983. One of the first victims. His body had been found, but it had been wrong. Jessica shivered and pressed on. Finally, she found it. A hidden clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees. In the center sat the remnants of an old camp, tattered tents, collapsed fire pits, abandoned gear, everything left behind in a hurry. It was like stepping into a time capsule from 1983. Jessica crept forward cautiously. There was something almost ritualistic about how the gear was arranged. Neat piles of supplies, boots lined up in rows, empty backpacks placed in a circle. At the center of the camp was a large, scorched patch of earth charred black. Something terrible had happened here. She knelt down to examine the ground. That's when she found it. A battered leather journal half buried under ashes. It belonged to David Wills. Jessica flipped through the journal with shaking hands. Most of it was logistical notes, search coordinates, maps, inventory lists. But toward the end, the handwriting grew frantic, almost illegible. The final entries chilled her to the bone. We hear them at night. Not animals. Not people. Voices calling our names from the woods. John went missing yesterday. He followed the voices. We found his boots at the river. Nothing else. Last night, the mist came alive. I swear I saw her. My daughter. But she's been dead 3 years. I almost followed. Almost. They're trying to make us stay. Make us part of them. If anyone finds this, burn it all. Don't listen to the voices. Don't look. Jessica's breath caught. It was the same thing she had seen carved into the ruins. Don't answer. Don't look. Don't stay. The voices returned. The mist thickened. The air grew colder. Jessica heard them again, the whispers, but now they were louder, more insistent. Jessica, please help me. Emma's voice. Jessica clutched the journal tighter, trying to block out the sound. But then came another voice. One she didn't recognize. You can't leave. You're ours now. The trees seemed to close in around her. Shapes moved at the edge of the clearing, dozens of them. Some human, some not. A man staggered out of the mist, his body twisted wrong, wearing a moldy ranger uniform from the 80s. His face was a nightmare. Skin gray and cracked, mouth hanging open as if frozen mid-scream. Jessica stumbled back, dropping the journal. All around her, the figures gathered. Lost hikers, missing rangers, victims of Coldwater. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering, "Stay, stay, 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 stay." Jessica sprinted for the tree line. Hands reached for her, cold, brittle hands snapping at her clothes. She tripped over an exposed root, slamming hard into the ground. When she looked up, a new figure stood in her path. Emma, or what looked like Emma. She was smiling, that same awful, wide, unnatural smile. "Stay with me, Jess," it said in Emma's voice. Jessica screamed and threw the journal at it. The figure recoiled, hissing, as if the words burned it. Jessica scrambled to her feet and ran, blindly, crashing through the undergrowth, heart pounding, lungs burning. She didn't stop until she reached the river. Only then did she risk looking back. The figures stood at the edge of the woods, watching, unwilling or unable to cross the flowing water. For now, across the river, a cabin sat tucked into the trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. Jessica stumbled toward it, pounding on the door. It opened a crack. An old man peered out, wrinkled, hollow-eyed, clutching a shotgun. He said one word, "You're lucky." Barely. Jessica collapsed inside. The man bolted the door behind her. Jessica Blake had escaped the silent grounds, but survival came at a cost. Inside an old cabin, a lone man held answers. Answers Jessica might not survive hearing. Jessica sat trembling by the fire, soaking wet, her clothes torn and her hands scraped raw. The old man watched her carefully from across the room, the shotgun never leaving his lap. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Name's Elias." His voice was rough, cracked from years of silence. Jessica croaked out, "I'm Jessica Blake. My sister Emma, she's missing. Please, I need help." Elias didn't react. He stared into the fire, eyes distant. "Ain't the first time Coldwater took someone. Won't be the last." Jessica begged him for answers. What was happening in the woods? Where was Emma? What were the things she had seen? Elias finally looked at her, and for the first time, Jessica saw real fear in his eyes. He leaned forward, voice low and urgent. "You ever hear of a calling well?" Jessica shook her head. Elias continued, "Old as the earth itself. Some places ain't meant to be walked by man. Some places, they call to you, call in your voice, in the faces of people you love, promise you what you need most. And when you listen, when you answer, they take you." Jessica's blood ran cold. "The ruins," she whispered. "The well. I saw it." Elias nodded grimly. "Coldwater ain't just a place. It's a wound. Something broke through here a long time ago. Something that don't belong. Every so often, it wakes up hungry." Jessica remembered the faces she had seen carved into the altar. The shifting figures in the mist. They weren't ghosts. They were echoes, remnants of those who had answered the call. Elias threw an old folder onto the table. Dust puffed into the air. Inside were grainy black and white photographs, government issued. Maps marked with excess. Memos stamped, top secret. Jessica flipped through them. There it was. 1981. Operation Wildfall. An experimental military operation designed to contain anomalous activity around Coldwater Ridge. The documents detailed how soldiers had been sent in to neutralize the source. None had returned. Afterward, the government sealed off the area under the guise of environmental protection. Public hiking trails were built to steer people away from the real hotspots. But the seals didn't hold forever. The anomaly, whatever it was, began leaking back into the world. Calling again. Jessica clutched the folder, feeling sick. Is Emma still alive? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, pulled back the curtain and pointed into the mist. At the edge of the tree line, a figure stood. Emma, or the thing that wore her face. She was swaying slightly, arms limp at her sides, eyes black pits of endless hunger. Elias said quietly, "Maybe part of her is, but not enough." Jessica shook her head violently. No, I can save her." Elias sighed. "You ain't listening. Once they get inside you, once you answer, you're changed. There ain't no saving. Only stopping it from spreading." Jessica collapsed into the chair, heart shattering. "I have to try." Elias watched her with something like pity. "You leave now, you might still get out. You stay. Coldwater gets you, too. A new mission." Jessica stared into the fire. If she left, she'd never see Emma again, not even the twisted thing she had become. But if she stayed, she remembered the feeling when the voices filled her mind, pulling at her soul. The ruin, the faces in stone, the way the ground itself seemed alive. Coldwater was growing stronger. If no one stopped it, it would eventually spread beyond the forest, into the towns, the cities, the world. She had to act. But first, she needed to know. How do you kill something that isn't alive? Elias gave a grim smile. You don't. You cut it off. Burn the root. Collapse the well. Jessica set her jaw. Then that's what I'll do. But Coldwater was already waiting. The ground shuddered beneath the cabin. Dust rained from the ceiling. The fire guttered and died. Outside, the mist rolled thicker, darker. Figures emerged, dozens of them, lining the woods. Waiting. The old man loaded his shotgun and tossed Jessica a flare gun. "If you're serious about ending this, you're gonna need more than guts." Jessica pocketed the flare gun. She would need to go back to the ruin, back to the well, face whatever waited down there, and destroy it, or die trying. Jessica Blake knew what she had to do. Destroy the source, seal the wound. But Coldwater doesn't give up its prey so easily, and at the bottom of the well, something ancient was waiting for her. Jessica strapped on Elias's old backpack, packed with the essentials. Rope, flares, a battered, half-working radio, a rusted revolver with only 3 bullets. Not much, but it would have to be enough. Elias stood in the doorway of the cabin, shotgun across his chest, watching the mist. "Remember," he said, voice rough, "it ain't just what you see down there. It's what you hear. No matter what, don't answer it." Jessica nodded grimly. She crossed the river at dawn. The forest was alive with whispers. The climb back to the silent grounds was brutal. The mist clawed at her skin. The ground itself seemed to resist her, roots tangling her feet, branches scraping her arms and face. Several times she heard footsteps behind her, soft, careful. When she spun around, she glimpsed pale figures darting between the trees. Watching. Waiting. At the clearing, the ruin loomed through the fog, black against the gray sky. The figures from before were there too, standing still, faceless. But they didn't move to stop her, as if they were waiting to see if she would succeed or fail. Jessica didn't hesitate. She ran for the trapdoor. The stone door groaned open, revealing the black maw below. Jessica clipped her rope to a crumbling metal anchor and lowered herself into the dark. The air grew colder, wetter, heavier. The walls were slick with moisture and pulsed faintly, like breathing. She descended for what felt like hours. The deeper she went, the more the voices grew, a low, endless chorus of pleading, crying, laughing. All of them in familiar voices. Emma. Her mother. Her own. "Come down, Jess. We miss you. It's safe here. It's home." Jessica squeezed her eyes shut, focused on her breathing. They're not real. They're not real. But when she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone anymore. Figures moved along the walls, pressed into the stone like wet paper, twitching and whispering. Hands reached out, grasping at the air, scraping stone. Jessica swung the flashlight wildly. The faces were distorted, melting, some frozen mid-scream. Some bore twisted versions of people she knew. At the very bottom of the shaft, the well widened into a vast underground cavern. And there it was. The calling well. It was massive, a yawning hole in the center of the chamber, ringed with ancient stones carved with the same spirals and human faces. Mist poured from it like smoke. The GPS beacon Emma had carried lay nearby, blinking weakly. And standing next to the well. Emma, or what was left of her. She turned when Jessica approached, smiling that awful, broken smile. Her voice was soft, pleading. "You found me, Jess. You can help me now, just come closer, just a little closer." Jessica's hand drifted toward the flare gun. Every fiber of her being screamed run. But she held her ground. "Emma, if you're really in there, fight it. For a moment, just a flicker, Jessica thought she saw something real in those black eyes. Fear. Desperation. Then the thing lunged. Jessica dodged, firing the flare gun instinctively. The flare slammed into the creature's chest. It shrieked, a sound not meant for human ears, and staggered back, smoke pouring from its body. The cavern trembled. Chunks of stone rained from the ceiling. The well roared, the mist swirling faster, angrier. Jessica knew it wasn't enough. Burning the puppet wouldn't destroy the master. She had to destroy the well itself. She ran toward the edge, but the ground buckled under her feet. More figures emerged from the walls, the lost, the taken, their faces melting, mouths screaming. Jessica fumbled in her pack. The last flare. Her last shot. She jammed the flare into the pack's fuel canister, rigging a crude explosive. The mist howled around her. The voices turned savage. You'll never leave. You're ours now. Jessica hurled the bomb into the well. For one terrible heartbeat, silence. Then, boom. Collapse. The cavern shook violently. The well ruptured, vomiting black mist and chunks of stone. The figures shrieked in rage and agony. The entire world tilted. Jessica sprinted for the rope. She climbed, hands bleeding, lungs burning. Behind her, the cavern was collapsing. The mist clawed after her, howling her name. Jessica. She hauled herself out of the ruin just as the trapdoor blew apart in a blast of cold, sour air. The ground around the ruin cracked and sagged, swallowing the stones into the earth. The silent grounds themselves seemed to breathe a final, shuddering gasp and then fell deathly still. Jessica stumbled away from the ruin. The mist began to lift. For the first time in days, sunlight broke through the clouds, weak but real. The figures at the tree line faded like smoke. Gone. Coldwater Pass was finally silent. For now. But then, Jessica reached the river by sunset, dragging herself across the stones. On the far bank, Elias was waiting. He helped her out of the water wordlessly. They sat by a fire, neither speaking, both knowing words weren't enough. Jessica looked up at the stars. Real stars. No mist. No whispers. And then her phone buzzed. One new message. Unknown number. No text. Just a photo. It showed Jessica standing alone at the edge of the well. Smiling. Eyes black as endless pits. Jessica Blake thought she had ended the nightmare. But cold water doesn't just haunt the woods. It follows you home. Jessica stared at the photo on her phone, hands trembling. Her. At the well. Smiling that awful, broken smile. Black eyes staring into the camera. But she had destroyed the well. Hadn't she? She showed it to Elias. The old man's face darkened. You never really close a wound like cold water. You just make it bleed somewhere else. Jessica's stomach twisted. You're saying it's not over? Elias nodded grimly. You might have sealed one gate, but you're marked now. Jessica whispered. Marked for what? That night, the dreams began. Jessica saw Emma, real Emma, wandering a shattered version of the forest. The trees bled black sap. The sky was a pulsing red wound. In the dream, Emma turned to her, mouth moving, but no sound came out. Behind her, something massive stirred in the mist, something with too many limbs, too many faces. Jessica woke up screaming. The old cabin was empty. Elias was gone. Only a note remained, scrawled in shaking handwriting. Run. Something new. Outside, the woods were no longer silent. The mist had returned, but it was thicker, almost oily, twisting into grotesque shapes as it moved. Shapes that watched her. Shapes that knew her. Jessica fled the cabin. But no matter which direction she ran, the landscape around her twisted. Paths led back to the same river. The same clearing. The same broken cabin. She was trapped. Coldwater wasn't just a place anymore. It was inside her. As she staggered through the woods, exhausted and terrified, she heard it. Emma's voice. Not warped. Not monstrous. Her real voice. Jess, help me please. Jessica froze. There, sitting on a fallen log, was Emma. The real Emma. Pale, shivering, terrified. Jessica didn't move. She remembered Elias's warning. It ain't just what you see down there. It's what you hear. But this felt different. Real. Emma looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. They're coming, Jess. And if they find you first, they'll wear you like a mask. Suddenly, the earth trembled violently. A deep, grinding roar split the air. A fissure tore open in the ground, a massive, yawning crack that belched thick, black mist. From it, the things emerged. Twisted, broken versions of people Jessica had seen before, hikers, rangers, even children. Their faces melted, their bodies too long, too thin. And leading them was something worse. Something massive. A towering figure stitched from the remains of 100 souls, their faces screaming silently from its shifting flesh. Jessica grabbed Emma's hand. Run. They sprinted into the woods, the mist howling after them, the rift growing wider, swallowing the forest piece by piece. They ran for what felt like hours. Sometimes Jessica could swear the ground under her feet wasn't earth anymore, but something living. The forest changed behind them, trees warped into bone-white spires, rivers turned to streams of black tar. The world itself was unraveling. And Jessica realized the awful truth. She hadn't escaped the well. She had brought it back with her. Coldwater wasn't a location anymore. It was spreading, and she was patient zero. Finally, they collapsed in a hollow beneath a ridge, gasping for breath. Jessica turned to Emma, real Emma, and said, "How do we stop it?" Emma shook her head, sobbing. "I don't know. I think it needs an anchor. Someone to bind it here." Jessica understood. A sacrifice. Emma nodded miserably. Jessica looked out over the forest, watching as the mist consumed everything. She had a choice: sacrifice herself and seal the rift, at least for a while, or run and doom everything outside these woods. The mist crept closer. The faces in the fog grinned and whispered her name. Jessica took a long, shaking breath. She looked at Emma, at the real terror in her sister's eyes. She thought of all the people who would be swallowed if she failed. She made her decision. Jessica stood, stepped into the mist, and whispered back, "I'm not afraid." The mist recoiled, writhing like a wounded animal. The rift shuddered, and then the towering, stitched-together horror screamed. A sound so loud it shook the very air and charged toward her. Jessica didn't run. She closed her eyes, accepted it, and the world went white. Jessica Blake made her choice. She stepped into the heart of Coldwater. But what she became was never part of the plan. White, endless, blinding white. Jessica floated in nothingness, weightless, soundless. No mist, no forest, no Emma. Just the memory of her final step into the rift. The whispering had stopped. For the first time since entering Coldwater, there was silence. But silence wasn't peace. It was a trap. In the white void, Jessica felt something tug at her mind. Gentle at first, then with growing urgency. Memories flashed before her eyes. Hiking trips with Emma, laughter around campfires. The day she first read about Coldwater Pass and decided they would go there someday. The good memories twisted, darkened. The campfires burned black. The hikes ended in screams. The tug became a pull, yanking her downward, deeper into something she couldn't fight. And then she saw it. The gate. Not a door in the normal sense, but a swirling vortex of mist, flesh, and writhing faces, pulsing like a heartbeat. It waited for her, expecting her, needing her. She was the final piece. Jessica realized, with horror, what Coldwater had always intended. It didn't want to kill her. It wanted her to stay, to become part of it, to stabilize the wound between worlds, with her as the foundation. Her soul, her memories, her pain, an eternal anchor. She fought, screamed, pushed back with everything she had. But Coldwater had been inside her since she first heard Emma's voice in the trees. There was no escape. There never had been. With a final, shuddering breath, Jessica was pulled into the gate. Above ground, the rift sealed itself. The mist thinned. The forest fell eerily silent once more. Birdsong returned. The trees straightened. To an outsider, Coldwater looked like any other forgotten piece of wilderness. Harmless. But deep beneath the ground, Jessica existed, trapped within the structure of the anomaly. Watching, dreaming, calling. Emma stumbled out of the woods 3 days later. Disoriented, starving, half-mad. Rescue teams found her wandering the Coldwater trailhead, covered in cuts and bruises, babbling about faces in the fog, and Jessica still calling. She was hospitalized for weeks. Doctors chalked it up to trauma, exposure, dehydration. When asked what happened, Emma only said, "Jessica saved me, but she's still there. She's part of it now. And she's not alone." No one believed her. They never do. Months later, the authorities quietly reopened Coldwater Pass to hikers. No mention of disappearances. No mention of the rift. No warnings about the mist. Just a new, Small sign at the trailhead. Stay on the path. No night hiking. No camping. Do not respond to unfamiliar voices. Most tourists ignore it. They always do. Somewhere deep in the woods, just beyond where the rift once opened, a young couple sets up camp. As they sit around their fire, the mist begins to creep in. A voice drifts out of the trees. Soft, familiar, welcoming. Hey, could you help me? I'm lost. Sounds like Jessica. It is Jessica, but it's not Jessica anymore. And as the mist thickens, the couple leans closer to the sound. Curiosity winning over instinct. Coldwater Pass claims new visitors. The cycle begins again. Jessica Blake gave everything to stop Coldwater. But evil doesn't die. It waits. And now, a new chapter is beginning. The young couple's campfire crackled weakly as the mist slithered closer. They sat back to back, alert but laughing nervously. They thought they were safe. After all, the sign at the trailhead was just a local superstition. Just a story. But the voice was clear. Jessica's voice. Soft. Broken. Pleading. Help me, please. I'm lost. The girl stood, flashlight trembling in her hand. Hello? Who's there? The boy called after her. Wait, don't go out there. But it was too late. She was already stepping into the mist. Already answering. Already hearing the voices hidden underneath Jessica's. As the mist swallowed the camp, more voices joined. A ranger who vanished in 1987. A boy who disappeared in 2002. A whole family lost in 1995, their car found abandoned but empty. All calling. All echoing. Jessica's voice now layered with hundreds of others. No longer fully herself. Just another thread in Coldwater's endless web. Miles away, Emma Blake woke from another nightmare. Cold sweat. Screaming throat. Tears she couldn't remember shedding. In her dreams, Jessica stood at the edge of the woods, smiling that awful, empty smile. And every night, Jessica stepped closer. Emma knew she couldn't run forever. She packed her bag before sunrise. One last time. Back to Coldwater. Back to end it. For real. When Emma reached Coldwater's trailhead, the mist was already rolling low along the ground. The sign still stood. Stay on the path. Do not answer. She ignored it, headed straight for the heart of the forest. This time, she knew what to look for. The sudden silence, the temperature drop, the shifting paths. Emma followed the signs deeper, until she reached the silent grounds. The ruin was almost completely swallowed now, only a few black stones poking through the ground. Mist curled around them like fingers. Emma called out. Jessica, I know you're still in there. Fight it. Please. The mist thickened. Jessica appeared, stepping out of it like a ghost. She looked almost normal. Almost. But her eyes, those endless black pits, betrayed the truth. Jessica smiled soft. Sad. I tried, Em. I really did. Emma's heart broke. You're stronger than it. You don't have to stay. Jessica shook her head slowly. It's too late for me. Behind Jessica, the mist twisted into shapes, arms, faces, teeth. The forest itself bent toward her, needing her to stay. If Jessica left, Coldwater would collapse. Thousands of souls trapped inside would tear her apart trying to keep her. Jessica stepped closer. For a moment, Emma thought she might reach out, hug her. But Jessica just whispered. You have to warn them. Make them listen. Make them stay away. Tears streamed down Emma's face. I won't leave you. Jessica smiled again. This time, the faintest glimmer of her old self shining through. You have to. Emma stumbled back, choking on her sobs. Jessica raised one hand, a farewell, as the mist wrapped around her, pulling her back into Coldwater's endless hunger. The rift sealed behind her with a low, terrible groan. Emma staggered out of Coldwater 3 days later. Changed. Haunted. Alive. She spent the next year fighting, writing articles, giving interviews, warning hikers, testifying at endless government hearings. Most laughed. Some believed. The forest was too big, too old, too patient. And soon, Coldwater started calling again. New faces appeared in the mist. New voices echoed through the trees. And sometimes on the coldest nights, if you stand very still at the edge of the silent grounds, you might hear a soft, broken voice whisper. Please, help me. But by then, it's already too late. Because the moment you answer, you're already part of Coldwater. Forever.